Support for today's Heat Treat Radio episode is provided by Heat Treat Today's 2022 Media Kit. Download a full copy of the Media Kit at heattreattoday.com/2022 Media Kit. And welcome to Heat Treat Radio. Doug Glenn, publisher of Heat Treat Today, sits down with guest Bill Jones, CEO of the Solar Atmosphere Group Companies, in the premiere episode of a periodic feature called Heat Treat Legends. In these conversations, senior individuals in the North American heat treat market share their expertise and experience with those less senior. Our first legend on Heat Treat Radio does just that, sharing how he grew professionally and what advice a quote-unquote technocrat, as Bill calls himself, would give to the younger generations.
All right, well, welcome everyone to an episode of, in fact, this is our inaugural episode of Heat Treat Legends. We're going to start with a true Heat Treat legend, gentleman by the name of William Jones from Solar Atmospheres, Solar Manufacturing. We're going to talk to him about his life experiences and some of the things that we'd like to get his perspective on. So, Bill, first off, I just wanted to thank you for joining us. Appreciate you joining us for this episode, Heat Treat Radio.
Oh, thank you very much, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity. And as you know, I've had a long life, and to be a legend is something I never really expected. Most of us don't.
Let's just talk a brief introduction. Who you are, where you are right now, and what your role is in the companies that you own.
I've been a technocrat all my life. It started when I was very young, when I was really about 7 or 8 years old. And I've always been very technically oriented and technically driven. As a matter of fact, the various people that I have worked for have always complained about that. And they said, Bill, you're always interested in the technology and you're not interested in whether you're making or losing money. And we don't want to hear about the technology. We want to see what's on the bottom line. So that's sort of where I came from. So in my after I graduated from college, I went to work for a small company, and we were involved in electromechanical things. A lot of our work was development work out of the DuPont company from their experimental station in Wilmington, Delaware, which was one of the premier development centers in the country. I don't think it's that way so much anymore, but it was at the time. It was a pyramid sort of place. Anyway, I was introduced to some extent in my early days. I was introduced particularly into dew point analyzers. They had developed a trace, what they called a trace moisture analyzer, which would measure down to about 1 or 2 parts per million. And it was right out of the development laboratory, and our company built it. And then my boss at that time, he worked out to have a license to build the instrument. And I ended up to be the engineer in charge of putting the thing into production. So like I say, at the time, and we're talking about now late 1950s or so, or 1960s anyway, something like that, there was no real continuous recording of moisture or dew point. I'm talking about low, like down around minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit, a few parts per million. Mm-hmm. And so that was sort of a breakthrough. And it was an interesting instrument. The instrument is still being built. And I was very instrumental in that instrument. So that was my sort of introduction into the technology, so to speak. And so then I went on, and I became involved in optical pyrometers. As a matter of fact, I was going to bring with me, and I didn't, one of the early temperature optical pyrometers, which was built by Leeds and Northrop. Yeah. And that was developed in the 1930s, and it's still used today. And it was the standard in the industry for many, many years. Anyway, that introduced me into the furnace industry and measuring temperatures with that instrument, and then with an electronic optical pyrometer that was developed by another company. and I learned all the problems with optical pyrometers, with respect to emissivity and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that was sort of my early years. I went to work really then in about 1963, I think it was. I went to work for ABAR, and I was the 8th employee with the company.
Okay.
So that put me into the furnace business. Now, the ABAR furnaces at that time were very high techy. They were, designed to operate at temperatures of 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit and up. Above temperatures where you could really use thermocouples, actually. So that fit with my optical pyrometer experience, one of the reasons I went there. So we were building these furnaces, and we built them for the electronics industry, particularly for sintering of tantalum anodes. And so I had a very wide experience with that particular product. And then it graduated into, we got involved in other technology. Particularly, we got involved with more normal, what I'll call industrial processing, because this high temperature technology was either solid state related, like with the tantalum capacitor, or with at that time with the development of the space launching and all that sort of thing.
Sure.
So then, with the changes in administration, and we went away from space technology to some extent in the middle '60s. So it meant that we had this furnace technology, and we had to put it to use. So then we looked at industrial processes. So we started to look at things like jet engine processing, parts for jet engines, and all that sort of thing. So that really was my very early years to get into this business, and it morphed. I went into, as I say, into the production aspect of the furnaces, and a very significant note. We built a number of furnaces for what was the atomic energy people, particularly at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And there was a bid came out for a horizontal vacuum furnace, and it had a one-line drawing of a hot zone with a ring.
Okay.
And, well, I shouldn't say a ring. We made it into a ring. But it was this line drawing of what a round hot zone with this part sitting in the center of it, which I really can't say too much about. But anyway, I didn't design that, but we had a couple of engineers that designed the hot zone. And at that time, the ABAR was owned principally by a man by the name of Charlie Hill. And so he sort of overlooked the whole project. And at the end of the day, after the thing was built and not turned on, they handed it over to me. And I was like the equivalent of chief engineer for the company. So I had the task of starting that furnace up. And it was a very interesting experience. And it was for the first time that I really saw what that ring hot zone could do. And didn't really recognize all of its advantages when we first put it online and started to build it, or test it, I should say. But we realized that we had something different. But whenever you have something different, you don't always know what to do with it. Exactly. So that's about where we were. But in a year and a half, we started to see the advantages of that hot zone. Yeah. And now I was instrumental in the development of the gas cooling system.
Okay. Yeah.
And because the original system did not have any, it did not have any recirculation abilities. In other words, it would not quench. Right. So it was just static cooling. So that whole thing of how to do that, I worked on that and got it. So after a lot of failures, I might say, we got it to work satisfactorily, and it has grown and grown and grown ever since. Yeah. So there's other things about the furnace technology that I've had my fingers on.
Right.
And it's been a very pleasant experience, Doug.
Yeah.
And I could go on for the rest of our time talking about this, but I won't.
No, that's good. That's good. At least gives our listeners some sense of your background. And I might mention, and we'll show this on the podcast, Bill, but I might mention anybody else interested in learning more about Bill. Bill's, besides being a technocrat, he's also an author. And he's authored a book here called The Golden Nugget, which came out, I think, in 2017. And it goes into a lot of detail, probably mentions a lot of the things that you've mentioned here, but and much, much more. So if anybody's interested in getting a copy of that book, we'll put some information up at the end where people can either contact myself or you directly, Bill, and they can get a copy of that book. So
thank you, Doug, for the plug. Let me say this, that anyone who wants a copy of that book, I will be very happy to send it to them at no charge, postage paid. So,
okay, very good. Well, you're being much more generous than I was going to be. I was going to say, feel free to call me. I'm going to charge you $50 for this book, and you have to pay postage.
No.
Well, let's move on. Let me ask you a couple questions. I think people are going to be interested in knowing some of the life lessons that you've learned and things of that sort. So, when you look back on your career, Bill, which has been, good 50 years, I'm guessing.
That's right.
What would be, in your mind, the top 1 or 2, maybe even 3 accomplishments? I mean, when you're taking that 30,000 foot view and looking back, what do you see as far as major accomplishments?
The major accomplishment, obviously, is the development of the vacuum furnace.
Yeah,
and that particular horizontal ring furnace.
Yeah,
it's been copied. We didn't patent it at ABAR. Unfortunately, we should have, but we didn't know what we had, honestly. And then it got out into the field anyway, and we couldn't patent it. Right. But aside from that particular approach, that round furnace approach, has been duplicated by all of our competitors around the world. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I feel that's a major accomplishment, and it really has my name on it, which nobody will tell you.
Right.
But that's okay.
Well,
that's okay.
This is why we do these interviews, as we find out. And Bill, just so people know, if you look behind you on your screen, you've got a round cylinder furnace there. I think that's the type of thing that you're talking about with the flat band heating elements.
Yes, round elements.
Yeah,
and it's a graphite hot zone, which we developed. Our original hot zones at ABAR were all metal. Mm-hmm. They were molybdenum, and the elements were molybdenum, and the elements were all riveted together,
right?
And so forth. Now, the advantage of graphite is that you don't have to rivet anything, and actually. Right. Part of my development was to be able to design the furnace, the elements anyway, so that they could be bolted together. Mm-hmm. Originally, the graphite heating elements, particularly the ones that were in the Ipsen furnace and even predecessors before that, they were all tubular, and they were put together not with threads, but they were like put together like a not an erector set, but this where you have pins and
couplers of some sort.
Yeah, that's not I'm not quite thinking of it right. But anyway, they were just pushed together, really, literally.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
And they were troublesome. The joints loosened up, and they were difficult. Cheap, yes. The graphite tube was very, very inexpensive. So we developed. And that was done at my VFS when I established that company. We developed the round and also the flat, thin graphite heating elements, which were bolted together with graphite screws and nuts. Yeah, that was almost unheard of back then. Now it's been adopted all over the place today.
Right.
But that's some of the major accomplishments.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good. That is a major one. Well, I want to move on to the next question, Bill, and that's basically
Doug. Before you get off of this, that picture that you noticed, those big. The reason I selected that picture on purpose because to heat treat something of that size and to bring it to full metallurgical properties, which they are actually H11 or H13. I'm not sure which, but that's not exactly a forgiving alloy to heat treat and bring to full hardness of that size and weight.
Right.
And that's the advantage of our vacuum gas quenching over pressure. That furnace, or actually almost any one of ours, if you design it right, will do that job. And I can tell you, I tried to in my early days getting into the heat treating business, I tried to do big rolls like that and fell right on my nose. This work was done out at our Hermitage plant, which Bob Hill runs, and it's an everyday thing.
Right.
The rolls like this and otherwise. That's why I put it up there.
Right. That Hermitage plant's in Western Pennsylvania. And yep, I've been in there. It's a great plant. You've got a lot of furnaces, much bigger furnaces than that even. So I want to get to the kind of the human side of things here. You know, you've had a significant impact on a lot of people in the heat treat industry, myself being one of them, to be quite frank. But I'm curious, when you were a young man getting involved in the industry, who were a couple of the people who maybe had a significant impact on you? I mean, who helped you along?
I worked for a company up in Attleboro, Massachusetts for 2 years or so. Mm-hmm. And they had developed a two-color optical pyrometer, and that's why I went to work for them. It had all sorts of problems because of emissivity, which it's a technical thing. I don't want to get into it. But the two-color pyrometer has not been really very well accepted because of that stumbling block. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the owner of the company, George Bentley, Dr. George Bentley. Yeah. Now, I had been, as I say, I was with him for 2 years. I decided that I wanted to leave the company. Now, I was a field engineer for them in the Mid-Atlantic, operating out of Philadelphia. That company is located in Boston.
Right.
George called me on the phone. He said, "Bill, I'd like to talk to you. I know you're leaving the company, but I want to have a time with you." I said, "Okay." So this is back in the day when travel was not all that great. So it took me most of the day to get up there. And the next day I went in to see him at about 9:30 in the morning. I sat down with George and we both chit-chatted for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And the most important thing he said to me at the end of the conversation, he said, "Bill, I want to tell you something. I have observed you over the years." And he said, "I can tell you, you are never going to be happy until you run and own your own business." So I looked at him and, that went right over the top of my head.
Yeah.
Because that was never a thought ever in my mind.
Yeah.
So, it didn't really have any impact for several years. But later I realized he was right. Yeah. Until you're sitting in the top chair and until you're making the decisions of winning and losing, you don't know what it's all about.
Right.
So that's really that was a prime moving event. There were really, I can couple them together. There were two people that were quite influential, really in a negative way. And one was George Bodine from Lindbergh, and the other was Sam Whalen from Aerobraze. Okay. Now, toward the end of my A-bar career, I had decided I wanted to go into the heat treating business here in Philadelphia. So I met my wife, Mert, and I met with independently. We met with each one of them and their wives, and we had dinner. And they said, "Oh, Bill, you do not want to go into the Philadelphia area in the heat treating business. It will never be successful." So that was a put down. I met with both George Bodine and with Sam Whalen, and they both poured ice water down my back about going into business in the greater Philadelphia area in the heat treating business. Uh-huh. So I cataloged that, and later went and did it anyway. So in a negative way, those two were very influential. Right. Abe Willen at Pratt & Whitney. And I had some people from General Electric that were very influential. Yeah. So there's a whole litany of people that I could thank for what they've done in my life and what they've added to my career.
Yeah. Good. No, that's good, Bill. So let's advance on here to the next question. I think this is always interesting to find out from somebody. One of those things, if you knew at the beginning of your career something you know now, what would it have been? I mean, what was that, given your experience, what are the top 2 or 3 lessons that you've learned during your career that you think have been, most helpful to you?
Well, there's a lot of lessons learned. And I would say, we, as practical people in the heat treating industry, we tend to poo-poo education. Not always, of course. I have metallurgists and PhDs working for us in the company, and I've had others. Anyway, but my point is, we tend to, those of us who are practical engineers and people, others who've come up through the ranks, sort of like my son Roger and others. Mm-hmm. Well, we tend to look at the practical aspects of heat treating. And okay, so what's the lesson learned from that? Well, education is really part of it. The basis of what we do, really, it comes from the field of chemistry. Metallurgy grew out of chemistry.
Yes.
So, if you don't have a decent educational background, then you don't know the basis of where we came from or where we're. So that's the basis of where we're going. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is, what's the lesson learned? Lesson learned is don't reinvent the wheel, because the wheel does not have to be reinvented. And I think those of us in our younger years tend not to look over things like that. We tend to say, well, we're going to develop this and we're going to do it, and come hell or high water, and we end up falling on our nose. Yeah. So that's the point: is to take the time and effort to study what's been done, and then go from there. And I would say also the other thing is to listen to what people in the field want, and what their comments about what you're trying to do. So I think that's the most important lesson to share.
Right. Listen and learn. Learn and listen. Those are good, Bill. Appreciate that.
When we return to Bill and Doug, make sure you're ready to jot down why this family company remained a family company, as well as some tips from Bill as to how to choose the right job. But first, I want to take a quick minute to help you plan for 2022. As you already know, customers are biting at the bit to satisfy their heat treat needs. And with increased demand comes increased competition. So Heat Treat Today wants to help you address your marketing needs with a specific strategy for you. Print advertising, online web presence, periodic advertisements, and high-impact emails, a special combination of a sprinkle here and a little there. Heat Treat Today's 2022 Media Kit, located at heattreattoday.com/2022 Media Kit, is a great place to start. Get the lowdown on what's popular, when media items published, and what a package could cost. We love helping you help your customers. So if you know what you want, get in touch with the outstanding Michelle Rittenauer in sales via michelle@heattreattoday.com. Otherwise, heattreattoday.com/2022 Media Kit is the way to go. Now, over to Bill and Doug with the last segment of today's episode.
Any disciplines that you've developed, your work disciplines, just like your work day or your work week, any disciplines that you've developed over the years that have been helpful?
Well, as I said, part of your disciplines is your educational background. I don't want to emphasize that too much, but that's an important base to start from. Right. Now, my life has been a very work-a-day place. I mean, I have put all kinds of hours into my career and my work, and I didn't do it to make money. I did it because, as I said in my early comments, I'm a technocrat. And so if I see something that I think needs to be developed, I work on it and I get to it. So I think work ethic in our business is very important. And people who are successful, certainly in the heat treating business and in almost any of engineering discipline, you have to put work into what you're doing. And if you don't, and I'm talking about, more than 40 hours a week. You're going to work 40, 60 hours a week in order to accomplish. I know, Doug, you're doing that in what you do. because I see what your development of your magazine and your all the things that you do. You're putting endless hours into the development of that thing. The development of a business is like pushing a big cart up a hill, and you're going to push and get that cart up onto the top of the hill, and you never stop pushing.
Yeah.
You get to the top of the hill, and you think you're just going to relax and go from there, but you can't.
Yeah.
There's always another mountain.
Yeah,
And,
another hill, another portion of the hill. Well, let me ask you this, because it kind of addresses the next question I wanted to ask you, and that was about work-life balance. Have you had to struggle with that, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, that's a very interesting comment. If my wife was here, she would tell you that I've dedicated my life to my work and I've abandoned her. That's not really quite true, except, my wife, Mert, and I have been married for more than 60 years, and she is a wonderful helpmate. She has run the household since our early marriage and raised our children. I did too, but she was principal. The mother is the core of the family. And the father, he's just a procreator, I guess, or something like that. But you know where I'm coming from. So getting your life in balance with work is always a challenge, and I think. Yeah. And I've been involved in church things for many years, and one of our pastors once came to me with something he wanted me to do. Yeah. And his name was John Clark, and I said, John, don't you realize how busy I am, and to take this on is more than I really want to do? Yeah. And he said to me, Bill, don't you know, if you want something done, you go to a busy person. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So I did it.
So obviously. You got the job. Yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Oh, that's funny. Well, I've got a two-part question here for you now. And that's I'm sure over your career, you've had many ups and many downs. So I want to start with maybe one of the downs. What was one of the most difficult, trying times of your career? And then after that, I want to know, what was the highlight? What do you think was one of the pinnacles of your time?
Well, I would have to say the most trying time in my career, I've been involved in 3 lawsuits. And if you get involved with the lawyers and with the court, believe me, that is a trial. Now, I was successful in each one of these in not being litigated to the point where I had to either pay or go to jail or what have you. But when you get involved with the law and with attorneys, number one, it becomes expensive, and number two, you're going to have a lot of sleepless nights over it. And that's just bad. Now, I have learned to avoid that at all costs if I can. Yeah. Look, when you're in the business world, there are going to be challenging things. Something doesn't work, whatever, and somebody's going to come back at you if they can. We live in a very litigious world. That's the problem. Yeah. And people don't always live up to their obligations. And I've learned it's best to do that. I'll give you an example. Just within the last 2 years, this was not a legal problem, but we had a furnace that was in the field, and it had a deficiency in the furnace, and it was not easy to fix. So I made the decision to completely bring that furnace back here to our main plant and to give the customer a brand new furnace. Yeah. And by the way, we're talking about something that's $600,000. Yeah. Well, it's better to do that than it is to suffer the consequences. Yeah. By the way, go to court. Right. Now, we brought that furnace back, and I personally went over that with a fine-tooth comb to find out what in the world was wrong with it. We located the problem. So it was in the chamber. I had the chamber remachined on the front flange, and that meant tearing the whole furnace apart, putting it back together again. It was only 2 years old. So we completely fixed the problem, put it back online, and then we resold it. Now, we obviously lost money in the whole process, but our customer ended up happy with the new furnace, and we didn't, we satisfied him, and we went on from there. So they're just a highlight of some of the issues that you can get into.
Right.
There are some personal issues that sometimes are hurt, but there's also a lot of gratification too. A lot of people that I have appreciated some of the things that we've done, and I've appreciated more what they've done.
Yeah. So lawsuits and things of that sort obviously are kind of the low point. Can you nail down one? I mean, when you look back, what was the most enjoyable, the highlight of your career so far?
Well, okay, I would have to say that. Look, when I tested that first round hot zone, I did it by myself at night in a plant that I was the only one there. And we had a big sight glass in the front of the furnace, and I could see the entire hot zone, the heating element, the heat shields, the back, the ring, and so forth. And I was able to measure the temperature, and it was a wow. This thing works.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing is a highlight. I
would have thought, Bill, if I can interrupt you, I would have thought if I would have answered this question for you, I would have thought you would have said something along the lines of starting your own company and building you've built what? Well, not just two. You've built two furnace manufacturing companies, and you've got what, four fairly successful, I say fairly and with air quotes, right? Fairly successful commercial heat treat companies. I would have thought that a lot of the accomplishments on those lines would have been highlights for you.
Yeah, no, you're right. And along those lines, the car bottom furnaces that we've built, and particularly the ones that are at Hermitage in Western Pennsylvania, the very first one, that's a chapter in itself on how that furnace came to be.
Right.
Anyway, it was designed and built by a group of engineers, and I was on top of that. So and we met weekly during the design phase, and then we didn't put it together completely here at Souderton. We put it together to know that it was vacuum tight and so forth. Then we took the furnace all apart, shipped it to Hermitage, put it all back together again, and we ran test cycles on that furnace empty. And it did everything that we wanted it to empty, but that's not putting a workload in it.
Yeah.
So we had on the shop floor, one of the reasons for building that furnace was to process these big titanium coils that were very heavy. And so we put 6 of them into the furnace. I did that. I said, I want to process 6 of these coils. And we had like a 25,000 pound workload of titanium in the furnace, worth a lot of money. I mean, we're talking about probably $1 million of work in the furnace. So at the time, Bob Hill said, "Oh, Bill, you're not going to run the final product first." He said, "I think we should make a run with just some scrap steel that we have around." I said, "No, Bob, I am thoroughly convinced this furnace is going to work and work right. Yeah. So let's put the coils in there and run it." We did. You know what? It was 100% right. It worked, and so it was a big success. But to this day, Bob, you ever ask him about that, and he'll say, "Oh,
yeah." That was a risky venture right there.
Yeah, there have been other things too, but that's good. That was one of the highlights.
Yeah, that's good. All right, let me ask you a couple final questions, if I can. Based on what you're seeing going on today in the world, in the industry, wherever you want to take this one, Bill, is there any advice or wisdom that you'd give to today's up and coming heat treat industry people?
Well, there's yes. I would say this. There's nothing, as I think from my prior comments, you'll get this. There's nothing beats hard work and dedication to what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. So, what would I say to a young person? Let's say somebody that was in college maybe, and they want to think about their career. First of all, you want to do something that you're happy doing. You don't want to work at something that you're unhappy at. If you're unhappy, get out of it and go do something else. Right. So you want to be happy at your job. That's number one. Then you have to be properly prepared for it. You have to have enough education to go forward. If you're going to be a writer or is something involved in marketing, you have to have some experience and training in that field. Right. I have a marketing person sitting in the room with me, so I have to say that. She's a young person, so I can talk to her. But that's the kind of thing that I think that the advice I would give to a young person. You want to be dedicated, you want to be happy, and you want to work at it. You have to work at it. It's not going to you're just not going to have it handed to you. Right. You have to work, at least here in our economy, in the United States, which we have a wonderful opportunity. The only opportunity in the world really is here in the United States.
Right. Very good. So last question. This one has been an interesting kind of a question I'd like to, I'm curious about, the group of companies that you've established, solar manufacturing, magnetic specialties, all the solar atmosphere companies are all U.S.-based, family-owned businesses, right? A single business, I should say. I mean, separate entities, but all owned by you and Mert and whatever.
Well, no, that's right. No, I can tell you that 100% of our companies are owned by Mert and I. Yeah, and we have no other shareholders or stockholders. Originally at VFS, I did. Right. But when I that's a long story. The story's in my book. But no, today we are 100%. Mert and I own the businesses, and of course, this is a two-edged sword. If all these businesses are up and running and they're all successful, pretty much like they are today, and if I was 40 years old, I would have another, possibly 40 years to look forward to and to operate these businesses. Now, at my age, I'm over 80 years old. So how many years do I have ahead of me? And there, you can count them on one hand. If that, we don't know. We don't know.
Well, you don't know. I was going to say, let's not put a limit on that. Lord knows.
No,
but,
that's right. Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. You and I understand that all too well. Yeah. So, it's all in the Lord's hands. And Mert and I both feel that we've got a few years ahead of us. Yeah. But, we don't know. We just don't know. Now, someone else commented to me, they said, well, you're the only, most of your other competitors and so forth have been bought and sold by other businesses and you have not. Well, I've looked at these companies that have been bought. Somebody made some money when they were sold, but I can tell you the employees certainly didn't make out on that. And any employee that's involved, particularly if you're at the higher end of the company, your life is in jeopardy because you don't know what the new owners are going to do. Right, exactly. And half the time, you're going to be within 2 years, you're going to be out in the street. Right. And all the hard work that you've put into the company is going to go down the drain.
Right. Well, this is kind of getting to the core of the question that I wanted to ask, and that was that you've got successful companies going on. They're family owned. They're going into, I believe you've also got there sitting in the room there, a third generation of Jones who is going to be helping to run the business, things of that sort. So many of your competitors, whether they be furnace manufacturers or actual commercial heat treaters, have either been sold, consolidated into bigger companies, or on the furnace side of things, many of them are now owned by international companies outside the United States. My question to you specifically is, why do you think it is that solar has been one of the few companies that has been successful in maintaining a privately owned, family-owned business where others haven't?
A family-owned company, and the fact that we have not been bought or sold. And by the way, we've had the opportunity, but yes, I didn't want any part of it. Why? What's the bottom line? Why? Well, it's very simple. Money is not a driving factor in my life or my wife's life. Mm-hmm. Money is not it. The old saying is, when you go to the grave, there's not going to be a U-Haul in back of you. You're going there with what you came with, which is nothing. So, money is okay. my father once said, well, money doesn't really mean anything except that you can live a little more comfortably. Well,
Yeah.
he was right about that.
Yeah.
But at this point in our lives, my wife and I are comfortable enough, and we certainly don't need to add on and on and on to our personal wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess just to put it in simple terms, there's no reason for us to sell the company. If we can turn it over to our operating people who now are running it, and if they can do it successfully, God bless them.
Yeah.
And what I have started and my wife, Mert, have started can continue. And you're right. In the room with me is Trevor, my grandson, and he is a third generation. And in back of him, there's another Jones. His name is Cole, who is now 14 years old. He's not working for the company. I don't know what he's going to do. Like Trevor worked in this company since he was 16 years old, maybe a little earlier. He's saying, yeah, I think you're right. But, his whole life, like mine, has been dedicated to this business.
Right. Well, very good. Very good.
So I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. I think just the quick answer, you're not a money-driven person, I think says a lot. So, well, Bill, that's it. I really appreciate the time you've taken to spend with us. I want to encourage people in the industry to make sure they pick up a copy of your book, The Golden Nugget, and Entrepreneur Speaks by William Jones and Heather Idell or Ideal?
Idell. Heather Idell.
Heather Idell helped you write that book, so it's worth reading. Bill, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time you spent with us today, and congratulations on being a Heat Treat legend.
Yeah, thank you very much. The Lord's blessed us in that respect, Doug, and you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Right. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to Heat Treat legend Bill Jones. Heat Treat Radio is on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Podbean, and the website www.heattreattoday.com/radio. Also, to learn more about today's guests, head over to solaratm.com. You can also send an email to me and I'll put you in touch with Bill. My email is bethany@heattreattoday.com. We're always looking for new, interesting topics to talk about on Heat Treat Radio. If you have an idea for a future episode, or if you'd like to sponsor a future episode, let me know and we'll be in touch. Again, my email is bethany@heattreattoday.com. And just a quick plug before we go. Heat Treat Today has a lot of technical content that we promote and publish each week on Tuesdays. In fact, the feature is called Technical Tuesdays. Stop by the website, heattreattoday.com, or subscribe to the Heat Treat Daily e-newsletter to stay in the know every week. Heat Treat Radio would like to thank Heat Treat Today's 2022 Media Kit for sponsoring this episode. Plan your 2022 at www.heattreattoday.com/2022 Media Kit. This and every other episode of Heat Treat Radio is the sole property of Heat Treat Today and may not be reproduced in part or in whole without advance written permission from Heat Treat Today. Jonathan Lloyd, our very talented audio and visual producer, created and mixed most of the music that you heard today. Check out his professional work at www.jonathanlloydmusic.com. Thank you, Jonathan. And I'm Bethany Leon. Thank you for listening.